Welcome to Times Now. I'm Pratibha Chandran. There's been a big development in the US-Iran tensions. We get you all those details. Breaking updates coming in of the dramatic escalation from the United States, with President Donald Trump announcing that the US Navy will begin blockading ships entering or leaving the Strait of Hormuz, effective immediately. First reaction coming in from the US President Donald Trump, and he says the United States will blockade the Strait of Hormuz immediately. It's a statement that has been issued on social media, and Trump says the move follows the collapse of talks with Iran, blaming Tehran's refusal to abandon the nuclear ambitions. He warned that US forces could intercept vessels in international waters that pay tolls to Iran, and signaled that Washington is ready to finish the situation at an appropriate moment. My colleagues Rohit and Mayank are joining us on the broadcast with the details. Let me take this across straight to Rohit. Rohit, big message coming in from the US president. Take us through what he has said on social media.
Right, absolutely. Let me take you through the statement straight away. In fact, there were two posts that just came a short while earlier from Donald Trump. The first one reads, so there you have it. The meeting went well. Most points were agreed to, but the only point that really mattered, nuclear, was not. So effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. At some point, we will reach an all being allowed to go in, all being allowed to go out basis. But Iran has not allowed that to happen by merely saying that there may be a mine out there somewhere that nobody knows about but them. This is world extortion, and leaders of countries, especially the United States of America, will never be extorted. Further, Donald Trump also says, I have also instructed our Navy to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas. We will also begin destroying the mines that Iranians laid in the straits, and any Iranian who fires at us or at peaceful vessels will be blown to hell. So Trump making it clear that they are going to up the ante once again. Iran knows better than anyone how to end the situation, which has already devastated their country. Their navy is gone, their air force is gone, their anti-aircraft and radars are useless. Khomeini and most of their leaders are dead, all because of their nuclear ambitions. Trump further says that the blockade will begin shortly and other countries will be involved with this blockade. Iran will not be allowed to profit off this illegal act of extortion. They want money, and more importantly, they want nuclear. Additionally, at an appropriate moment, we are fully locked and loaded, and our military will finish up the little that is left of Iran. This was the first post that came in from US President Donald Trump. And in fact, he also put out another post shortly after that, where he says, Iran had promised to open the Strait of Hormuz and they knowingly failed to do so. This has caused anxiety, dislocation and pain to many people and countries throughout the world. They say that they put mines in the water even though all of their navy and most of their mine droppers have been completely blown up. They may have done so, but what ship owner would want to take the chance? There is great dishonor and permanent harm to the reputation of Iran and what's left of their leaders. So essentially, Donald Trump make it clear that they will now begin to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. They will not allow any of the ships to pass through until the entire demining process is done. He also speaks about the conversation that happened in Pakistan, where he says Field Marshal Asim Munir and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan were part of the conversations where, in fact, they thanked Donald Trump and his team for saving 30 to 50 million lives in what would have been a horrendous war with India. I always appreciate hearing that. So several aspects that he has covered in this post, but the key points, of course, being that they will now begin to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, and also making it clear that they will blow what is left of Iran. He also says that we will blow the Iranians to hell. So possibly the biggest threat ever since these conversations took place in Pakistan.
Okay, all right, Rohit, do stay with us. Sringer also on the broadcast with us. And Sringer, this is the biggest threat yet that has come from the United States. President Trump saying we are locked and loaded. He's also talking about blockading the Strait of Hormuz. Is that a possibility or not? Because of the geography of the region, it's not going to be easy for the United States. But before we come to that, let's talk about what can happen. Trump going on to say that the biggest issue is that Iran is refusing to give up its nuclear program, and Trump says that we are ready because the collapse of talks with Iran has happened, and he has put the blame entirely on Tehran's refusal to abandon the nuclear ambitions.
Yes, undoubtedly. He has blamed Iran for two things. One, the nuclear issue, the fact that Iran is refusing to give up its plan to have a nuclear weapon. That's what Trump says. And the other, of course, is to ask for tolls for ships crossing the Strait of Hormuz. Now, he objects to both, and now we have a naval blockade. Now, these things have happened in the past. In 1962, Kennedy had done a quarantine in much more difficult circumstances at the height of the Cold War. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, those 13 days, the world was very close to World War III. Now we have to see what the Iranians do. If there is a naval blockade, then of course it affects a lot of people over a lot of days. It's also important to see what the Chinese do, because let's not forget a lot of Iranian oil goes to China. So how China treats this is also important. But this blockade, how long will it last? How intense will it be? What it will lead to is really hard to say now.
Okay, all right. US says that it will begin the process of blockading the entire region. The Strait of Hormuz will be blockaded. That's what the US president has said. Mayank, is that actually going to be practical for the United States? Militarily, yes, it's a possibility. US can actually do that. But there will be a heavy price to pay because of the geography of the region, because of Iran's proximity to the Strait of Hormuz. What is the kind of impact that such a decision by the United States will have?
I'm reminded, I'm just wondering about the people or the ships and the countries which, when if they pay the toll, they'll be stopped by the US, and if they don't, Iran is not about letting them go from that side. So it's interesting to watch actually. Militarily, the two vessels, big, large vessels today which have turned back, hearing of the conditions and situations in Strait of Malacca, says that practically people are following whatever the Iran is saying, or they are worried of the situation which is prevailing in that area. Strait of Hormuz is a narrow passage, and mind it, it is the world's biggest strait in terms of its the volume of energy, which includes petroleum, gas, and the other products which flow from that side, and it can be actually blockaded. It is the biggest strait which can be blockaded, and that's correct practically. But then when I say practically, then the people are worried of the kind of military which prevails in that side, and Iran, because of this coastline, which is the longest in that side, it can easily dominate, and it can easily dictate the way the things and the movements can take shape that side. So, but the way the statements have come out from the US, one can interpret that only once the people have the ships, the vessels, which is civil or merchant, they have passed the strait and they are out into the open, then only the US is going to block. Because once they have paid the toll, then only they'll be able to pass that strait. So what you see is actually it's a difficult situation which is about to begin with. The way the things are shaping in that area.
Absolutely.
And as I said, practically
of the region, it's not going to be easy. Mayank, I'll come back to you in just a moment. Do stay with us. I also want to introduce guests joining us on the broadcast. Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, defense analyst, and Lieutenant General D.P. Pandey on the broadcast with us. I want to begin by asking you, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, is it really possible for US to blockade? What is the price to pay?
Thank you. Definitely challenging, but yes, it's feasible, because that's the only way, because boots on ground are it's very difficult to put boots on ground at this point of time. And therefore, the naval blockade is the only way that you can go about it. Irrespective of it being narrow, irrespective of the geography, whatever the Iranians do, they have a blockade all around. Virtually at a point of time, there will be no entry and no exit should anyone collect or extort. And therefore, this monitoring is something which has to be done. It is very much feasible, challenging, because it is ultimately going to throttle the Iranians. And more than anything else, the Chinese are going to feel the heat of it, because 80% of it goes to China. The oil from Iran goes to China. And even right now, even 1.5 million barrels of oil that is being exported by Iran is all going to China. So in that context, I think, yes, the Chinese will also have to now play a role to ensure and put pressure on Iran that the Strait of Hormuz be kept open. Otherwise, neither their ships will find it, their ships, their tankers are going to find it very difficult to take anything out of it. At the same time, much of the pipelines along the east-west coastline of the Saudi Arabia, UAE may work, but that's just about 9 odd million barrels of the total oil that needs to go out of this place, approximately about 20 million barrels per day. So there's a lot that is there. It's difficult, but possible, and indeed challenging, I think, an easier way rather than having boots on ground.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, it's easier than having boots on the ground, yes, but to ensure any smooth sailing of the vessels from the region, it would mean that the United States would need to secure not just the waters, but also the land along the Strait of Hormuz. And it's not going to be easy for the United States. Lieutenant General D.P. Pandey, you know, the risk to the assets, the U.S. is going to risk security to its assets. Is it a risk that U.S. will be willing to take?
Yeah, so firstly, let me just confirm what my senior general, Gani, just said. Firstly, it is not difficult. Their ships are already there. They are in the region. Technology allows you not to be covering every mile of coastal area or this thing, and it's a naval blockade, it's not a road blockade, right? Technically, Iran is boxed in because the only route they can take out whatever assets they have to take out is through Afghanistan or through Balochistan and then on to Pakistan towards China. If you look at the entire game, the game is not about Iran. Trump may be talking to Iran, but actually the messaging is for China. Even to get Iranians onto the table for talking, it was a China which was behind. So when you choke off, when you actually say that you're going to blockade the Hormuz Strait, the people who are truly affected are, because everybody else is now diversifying very rapidly and they are plugging into other places for drawing their oil and gas. The people who are directly affected are the ones who are drawing the oil from Venezuela, from where 90% of the oil was coming to China, which has been now dried off. And even with Iran, something was sneaking off in terms of the ghost tankers and something or else was just slipping away. Now, when naval blockade, now what is the implication of naval blockade? In any case, nothing was moving from Hormuz. When you carry out a check in last about 42, 43 days, you virtually saw only those carriers which had been cleared by Iranians, and they are very handful in numbers. It was not that the money and the tankers were just moving in terms of hundreds. They were hardly any. Last about 3 days or 4 days in the ceasefire talks we announced, only about 15 to 20 tankers had passed away till yesterday evening, and about few tankers have passed away today. So this is not even a trickle. These are all drops. So willy-nilly, there is already a blockade which has been established by the Iranians and not by the Americans. So when you go for a blockade, what has materially changed on the ground? Not much. It is you're just trying to reinforce. It is something like, in Kashmir we used to have Band, and then suddenly the government of Jammu and Kashmir will say that okay, nobody will come onto the road. You actually were reinforcing the Band of the separatists, which are being announced by the government application. So this is all bluster. This is a messaging towards the Chinese that now even if some oil sneaks out, we are going to stop it. Now that also is slightly difficult because please understand Chinese flag-bearing ship or carrying a Chinese oil when there's going to be stopped by the Americans, that will put into a direct context, right? So let's not take bluster to an extent. There is already a blockade. If the mines are already laid, we are not very sure that where the exactly mines are. There is hardly any Iranian navy to actually conduct any amount of pushing out of oil. So against which forces? He's on one line in his tweet saying that the entire Iranian navy has been destroyed.
Yes.
So then when you're putting out a blockade, it's against whom? So is it against the merchant ships? So, merchant ships can be monitored, they can be checked, there are aerial survey, we already agree. It's a very narrow lane. So we don't require to have a large force there. The forces which are already available is there. Second, about the cost part, okay?
Yes.
When you invest into war, then you invest into a war full strength, right? Americans are fully prepared to take it forward because it is into their interest. You see the yesterday or day before yesterday, the American president had sent out that all the tankers are lining up to the American shores. Hundreds of them are coming, welcome the faster turnaround that works. So in whose and everything is playing out, not surely against with the Iranians. And these are all measures to ensure that the ceasefire talks, which have not failed, actually everybody is calling these ceasefire talks a fail.
Okay.
Look at the statement of Iranians. Iranians just said that on round one, to get success, everybody knew it's not possible, right?
Yes.
So they have left the field open. Similarly, Vance has already said most of the points were agreed to, except for 2 or 3 sticky points are there. When you go for a talk and you resolve everything in the first hand, therefore there is some already compromise is set up and both sides will go not looking very nice over it. So they have shown a certain degree of commitment to
so
talks.
you're saying that back channel talks will still be going on. We'll come back to that as well on what went wrong. I also want to introduce other guests joining us on the broadcast, Dr. Wael Awad, senior journalist, and we also have Peter Kuznick, author and professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University. I want to ask you, Mr. Peter, on how you look at this latest threat that has come in from the United States. US says very clearly that the claims that are being made by Iran, that there are mines, is nothing but a threat or an extortion, going on to say that US will not be extorted. How do you look at this latest threat that is coming from the United States? Is it an actual step that could be taken by the United States, that there will be a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz?
I think that the United States is capable of blockading the Strait of Hormuz. Its impact is going to be pretty devastating on oil and gas prices when we wake up tomorrow morning. And in terms of stock market, it's going to have a devastating impact on the world economy, even worsening a very bad situation already. A blockade is an act of war. You have to remember that during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, President Kennedy ordered a blockade of Cuba, but he called it a quarantine in order to soften it a little. Trump was left with very few cards to play. He's in a very difficult position because the war is so unpopular in the United States. The New York Times did an analysis of the responses to the war on the Truth Social, on Trump's own platform, and found that of the actual MAGA people who responded, more than 50% were angry with Trump about the war. Many of them said they had voted for Trump 3 times, but would never vote for him again. So he's feeling that pressure. He's feeling the pressure from the Republicans who are up for re-election in the midterm elections in November, who know that they're going to get defeated. Many of them are dropping out. They don't even want to run. And so the world is also against the United States at this point. The U.S. does not have allies. The U.S. has alienated its allies because almost nobody other than Bibi Netanyahu wanted to see this war to begin in the first place. So Trump is in a difficult position. He doesn't want to send U.S. ground troops in. There's no support for that, maybe 7%.
Okay.
So he's looking for, he thinks he has to do something because the talks failed. And it looks, as Trump said, if the talks fail, I'm going to blame J.D. Vance. If they succeed, I'm going to take all the credit myself.
Yes. Yes, he did say that on a lighter note, and that does seem to be playing out as well. But Dr. Awad, is that how you look at what is going to happen next? Yes, blockading is possible, but it comes with huge costs. Does U.S. now find itself in a place where it doesn't know how to look back? They came into this war not expecting that it would escalate to this extent, but now the U.S. is left with no options.
Well, I think, yes, it left with no option, maybe unaffordable options that the United States is going to take, where President Trump maybe not a welcomed option as well. So therefore, he may be going for such kind of move where he will be look like a piracy law. He will activate the anti-piracy law all over the world because you are only doing what not supposed to do as a superpower. Here you are having a country, by blocking the Strait of Hormuz, you are not only harming the Iranian. The Iranian having 13 countries are surrounding them that they can export oil from, though it is the major route of supply from the Strait of Hormuz, but still you can find alternative. But what will happen to the global trade in oil? That is the question mark here, which will be quite harmful. And I agree with my colleagues who were saying that tomorrow you will wake up and the barrel will shoot up to $150. So who is going to pay? The poorer country in Asia particularly will start feeling the brunt of the American adventure. So I think the president of the United States, maybe I was thinking after Vance goes back, he will announce that he got the breakthrough and he would have been the success in getting an honorable exit from this war. But what he's doing now, he's preparing as well for a ground offensive, maybe some sort of adventure within the Strait of Hormuz. If the American warships start moving there for demining, as he says, and the Iranians are refusing them to do so. So I believe there will be some sort of a commandos operation where the American Marines will suffer a lot.
Okay, all right. And the entire world, because this is going to impact the entire world. What could happen next? But, of course, we do have that disclaimer that Trump has made this claim now. We don't know if it will actually happen or not. The negotiations may still be going on with Iran. But Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, on what has happened until now, US has made it clear that things didn't go according to plan. And they're very clear. We told Iran no nuclear program and they didn't agree to it. And it's clear that Iran is not going to agree to it. But Iran has also indicated that we are ready for the second round of talks. Is that back-channel talk still continuing? Is that a possibility? Because we've seen this happen from Trump multiple times. A big threat that is then followed with the climb down.
See, Pratima, the nuclear ambitions of Iran are not hidden. Much that was being stated that on the 27th of February, Iran seemed willing, as what Oman had been saying, and that this attack could well have been averted. But it is not so. The Iranian nuclear ambitions are quite evident. Even from the point of view of enrichment, from 3.67% going up right up to 60%, having all these laboratories 200, 300 feet below the ground into the tunnels is indicative that Iran had a clandestine nuclear program. If Iran had a clandestine nuclear program, and much that on the 12-day war, presumably, most of it would have been put into, non-operational. But notwithstanding that, having done so, and even now in the 39 days of war, also the nuclear sites being hit so hard, despite that, if the Iranians are sticking to their nuclear ambition and are not wanting to give it that 440 kgs of uranium that they're having, which is more than 60% enrichment, it is indicated that Iran still is not wanting to give up. If that be so, obviously that's a danger. And that is something which, even to begin with, a country may have a 15-point program, yet another may have a 10-point program, but it was a 2-point program that the Americans had put. The first thing was of which 95% was to give up your nuclear ambition, and the balance of it was to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. If what Iranians had stated on the 27th of February that they are willing to give up their nuclear ambition, that means 95% of the entire deal was done. If that hasn't happened, that means there is something more to it, and the Iranians are aware of the clandestine thing, and they're probably wanting to twist and turn. And the Strait of Hormuz, Iranians want to weaponize it. That is why this toll collection. That is why this indication that they have suffered a lot and probably want compensation for all the suffering that they've gone through. Not wanting to admit openly, but they know that this collection of money is primarily for that. In that case, the Strait of Hormuz, though not in international waters, but is an international strait. If it's an international strait, obviously there cannot be any extortion. If that be so, in that context, I think the Americans are right, no extortion. But the Iranians are also wanting money for compensating the damages and the suffering that they've gone through. In this particular thing, I think the Iranians really need to rethink. They mustn't overstep thinking that, well, the world sympathies with them, number one. Number two, to think that the morale is high, primarily because all of them have been able to, the resilience shown by the Iranians, one, and at the same time, the retaliation by the Iranians indicative that they have well been able to win. Okay. That is not so. Iranians have suffered and must accept it, admit it. And right now, these two conditions, the Iranians are willing themselves. On the 27th of February, what was it? The nuclear ambitions, Iranians were willing to cap it, number one. Number two, 27th of February, the Strait of Hormuz was open. So even if you go back to 27th of February, from the 28th, all that has started happening. I think it could well have been a way to begin with. But if that's not so, I think the only way the Americans have right now is the naval blockade, because boots on ground seem difficult. That is how I see it.
Okay, all right. So what could the response of Iran be? What is the worst case scenario? Now, remember, any move from the United States is going to have an impact on the entire world, on you and me. And we're going to be discussing about that and more after a very short break, requesting guests to stay with us. Effective immediately, the United States is going to blockade all of Strait of Hormuz. This is the claim that has been made by the US President Donald Trump. A dramatic escalation, going on to say that because Iran did not agree to the biggest point, which is the nuclear program, effective immediately, the United States, and he mentions the Navy, going on to call it the finest in the world, he said, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. He goes on to say that this is extortion by Iran and no country in the world will have to pay the illegal toll that Iran is trying to put on the countries. That's the claim that has been made. We're discussing on the impact that it will have on the world, because remember, if the United States does actually blockade all of the Strait of Hormuz, it's going to have an impact on the entire world. Oil prices are going to skyrocket. And we're discussing the impact, the worst case scenario, and the possible response that could also come in from China as well as Russia. Now, remember, up until now, we have heard words of condemnation that have come in from several countries, but there is no action that has been taken. Will this actually force the countries to pick sides? Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni is on the broadcast with us. So is Lieutenant General D.P. Pandey and Dr. Wael Awad, as well as Peter Kuznick. And Mr. Peter, what will the response of the world be? Because this is going to impact the entire world. Up until now, we've seen strong statements coming from China and Russia. Will such a move by the United States force the countries to take a stronger stance?
I'm not sure what stronger stance China and Russia can take other than going to war, which they're not going to do. China was instrumental in negotiating the ceasefire. China is directly impacted by this latest blockade.
Yes.
Is China going to try to send a Chinese ship to pick up that oil? Would the U.S. fire on a Chinese ship? I don't know. But that's why we need diplomacy, because we're on the verge of a world war and potentially a world nuclear war. So when J.D. Vance says, I've got tools, the U.S. has tools in its toolkit that the U.S. has not used yet, but is willing to use, everybody thought he's threatening nuclear war. We know that Trump has made threats that sound like they can only be achieved by nuclear war.
Yes.
When Trump says the civilization will end within 24 hours, I mean, it's a crazy idea, but Trump has the weapons to do that if he's willing to threaten the future of life on our planet. And this man is sufficiently emotionally deranged that anything is capable.
In fact, he did in his latest social media post as well say that we will end whatever is left of Iran. Dr. Awad, what does this indicate? What could happen? But of course, we have seen such grand declarations that have been made by Trump, but there is that air of mystery that still remains. Will the US act? What's going to happen next? Because previously it was end of the civilization. Even now, yet again, he goes on to say that we will end whatever is left of Iran.
Well, I think during the negotiations, the American was pressing the button that the Strait of Hormuz should be open.
Yes.
And the free trade should be carried out fully. And Iran refused, because Iran having the bargaining chips only with the Strait of Hormuz currently to put pressure on the United States. That is not the nuclear issue. The nuclear issue, they told them that we decided, we reached an agreement as the Major General said, we reached an agreement in Washington, and then Lieutenant General, Kulkarni, and we would reach there, and we have already decided, but you deceived us and you attacked us. So therefore, the Iranians are having a very strong bargaining chips at the moment, and they know they can hurt the United States, because the impact of the oil now, Americans are feeling the heat, not necessarily that the America is buying, but look at the scenario now. American president said himself, if the Strait of Hormuz is closed, come and buy from us. But you will come and buy from the 4 times the price, which you have been offered by these countries in the region. And if the United States go and attack Iran, oil infrastructure, that means Iran will retaliate and attack mainly the GCC country with their oil installation and the gas. That means we will never have oil for years. So that is one of the main objectives the United States wanted to achieve. But President Trump is unable to put his strategy because he kept us in strategic ambiguity. We didn't follow exactly what was his objective of this war after all. Was he blackmailed by Netanyahu? Was it an American war? Of course not. Then what is the outcome of this war and what his exit he wanted to do? By aggravating the situation and walking in the mud, I think he's fishing in a turbulent water.
Turbulent waters where the world doesn't know what's going to happen next and the entire world is on tenterhooks. And Lieutenant General Pandey, if you can come in here, you said that it's not going to be very difficult for the United States to blockade the entire region. What is the U.S. intending to do with this move? There is a price to pay, yes, but you're saying that the U.S. will be willing to pay that price because currently there doesn't seem to be any other option. But what is the U.S. actually intending to do? Does this create more pressure on Iran to come back to the negotiation table? Or is the U.S. actually looking at complete control of the Strait of Hormuz?
So, I don't, well, I do read the tweets and the messages, but I generally watch the actions. Right? This is not the first time he said that we'll destroy Iran.
Yes.
So he's been working to destroy Iran for 45 days. And, Iran is not a platform or an aircraft carrier or a frigate or a oil dump which you can just destroy or burn it away. It's a country, it's a piece of land, people, 90 million odd people. We just can't destroy. They're not being able to destroy Afghanistan, Iraq. Everybody is in good state or a bad state, they remain. So there is one factor. These are all bluster. The second part is when you say naval blockade, and I'll just repeat again, you don't have to block what you are already blocked. And the American Navy doesn't have to block which the Iranians have already blocked. So, to say that we are not going to have a naval blockade against what? So it is already blocked. So it is all very big words, actually. And this is a talk which is happening at the level of trying to throw a madman theory, which he does. But below the surface, behind the scenes, there's a talk which is happening, and Iranians may look quite silly or very, very, they may be radical to their own people or elsewhere. They may be whatever narrative comes out. But they're smart people. They are working at, they are talking. Now they're talking through, but you just can't come down up front in Pakistan on one day and say, your 20 points were there. Okay, we check all the boxes. Everything is fine. Okay, we'll go for a ceasefire. They need to go back and survive in a regime which they have been looking at and all the stuff. So while everything has been accepted, the only issue which remains bugging and tied to each other is the Hormuz opening, and the second is about nuclear program. So as General Kulkarni has said so very correctly that in case they are willing, we're willing on 27th to roll back or dilute their program or dilute the uranium, they can very well go back and make the statement. It may happen. There's another few days to go before the ceasefire actually, the timeline which is there. And oh, by the way, when 14 days get over, you may still find another tweet coming from Trump that the gods have requested him and some mysterious Iranians have requested him. And therefore, we are having an extended ceasefire for unable world to have peace for another 14 days. So this will become a certain degree of norm. And please understand, when ceasefire talks are happening, it is not happening between two parties. It is not between US and Iran. There are a large number of players which are involved.
Yes.
There are Chinese, Russians. Within Iran, there are sections of their own regime. You look at Israel, you look at the Gulf countries, there are a large number of people who are not sitting on the table itself. So when you look at the complexities involved, it is just not related only to the two subjects. There's a lot of people who have to be taken on board. But what I actually am worried is that this may be a facade which is happening, and as Peter has said, that there's a very high possibility that this gentleman may be convinced that they will put boots on ground. There's a build-up which is happening from the American side, either to put fear in the mind of the Iranians or the world that the ground operation may happen. The Chinese are filling the losses in terms of manpads and other equipment which is flying into Iran. during this period of ceasefire. And General Kulkarni will totally agree with me that while the talks are on, everybody is refurbishing, reinforcing, adding the supplies to prepare for that one possibility, which may swing that other 50% way that the ceasefire talks don't have any result. Last time, the talks on uranium, by the way, took 2 years to actually have a talk, and the peace was in vogue. This time, the war is there. There are sides which have been polarized. To actually get a ceasefire talk to be agreed within a short time was impossible. And I still think that in a couple of days, sanity will prevail on both sides, and they may agree to the term of both aspects. But yes, the deal which will happen between the Americans, the Gulf countries and others, that how much reparation has to be paid to the Iranians, in what format, will work out. But it just can't happen with Hormuz. Hormuz, the world will not agree. Omanis have already said, no, we don't want to partake of this whole business because it is not part of UNCLOS, and you may not like to sign on UNCLOS, but you can't charge $2 million to say that I'm going to get paid for. Even if Iranians' assets are unblocked, which have been under sanction and are frozen, they will have enough money flowing back to the economy. That, of course, that is theirs. So those kind of bargaining which will happen, and let's see what progresses.
Okay, so you said, let's hope that sanity prevails. Lieutenant General Kulkarni, is that a possibility at the moment, looking at how things are unfolding? And, considering the situation currently, considering the threats that have come in from the United States, what can we expect the response of Iran to be?
See, first and foremost, what General Pandey is saying, there are no options. Sanity has to prevail. Where are the options available to us? There is trust deficit. That's it. But that trust deficit over a period of time, like you rightly said, 2 years. You saw the JCPOC took 2 years. It will take time, but doesn't matter. It will take time. So the Iranians have options. It isn't that the Iranians are stubborn. They have options, and they will exercise those options. They only wanted to convey that they're deeply hurt, they're deeply destroyed. That is the way. That's not the way an old civilization must be treated. They must be treated with respect. There must be an honorable exit. That's all. What else are the Iranians saying? Right now, these 2 points that the Americans are insisting on, as regard the nuclear ambitions are concerned, they're willing to give it up. I don't think any Iranian leadership is saying that they will stick to it. No, they'll give it up. They will bring it to the IAEA inspections, 100%, irrespective whether they're 200 feet down or 200 feet up or above the ground. Everything will be open for inspection. Iran would be willing to do it. Iran doesn't want destruction. The second part, the Strait of Hormuz part, Iranians know they're fighting the entire world, but that's the only option left to them to pressurize the world, to pressurize America. You come on, release. This is not the way to treat us. This is not the way. You just carry on. My way is the highway. That can't happen. That is what the Iranians are up to. I'm sure sanity will prevail. I go along with General Pandey. There is no denying the fact. There are no options. The only option is that, yes, the Americans mustn't behave the way they're behaving. The language used must be a little more sensible for the Iranians to accept it. And the Iranians also must play on board and say, yes, we are willing to give up our nuclear ambition openly. Even now they can say so, that well, irrespective of the talk, nuclear ambitions, Iran does not hold, and we give it up totally. But yes, we want compensation for the damages done, because Iran's claiming $500 billion for damages. It's not easy. Tehran destroyed, irrespective of whatever it might be. Leadership gone, Tehran destroyed, Air Force gone, Navy gone, everything. There is so much of destruction. 13,000 targets hit, over a lakh of apartments destroyed. So Iran has suffered, and they must be compensated for the suffering. That is what they're asking, nothing else. Hereinafter, the talks can happen, and I'm sure they will have a more peaceful world. Yeah, Pratibha.
Yes, in fact, Iran has spoken of the trust deficit. We must also bear in mind the fact that the first attacks came in from the United States at a time when the talks were still going on with Iran. So Iran has said very clearly that the United States came with the mindset of setting their terms and conditions, and they were looking for an excuse to walk out of the negotiating table. This is what Iran has gone on to claim. So there is a trust deficit very clearly between the two sides. But when we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz, the latest threat that has come in from Trump, let's break it down for you and tell you why this is not actually going to be very easy for the United States. It is militarily possible. Yes, it is a possibility, but it's going to come with its own set of challenges. because of the geography. And let's break it down for you. This is the Strait of Hormuz that we're talking about, and look at the proximity that it has for Iran. And considering the challenges in this region, also, again, remember, Iran has gone on to claim that there are mines that have been put in place here. They claim that they don't know, or they're in the process of removing these mines. Now, take a look at this region and the proximity to Iran, and why, because of the geography, it's going to be very difficult for the United States. Yes, there could be a blockade in the region by U.S. naval fleet, but it is going to require the deployment of a significant naval fleet in the region. Is the U.S. prepared to have that kind of a deployment in the region? Is the question, apart from the fact that there could be a response that could come in from Iran. Not just do they have to secure the waters here, but also the land, and that's not going to be easy. We don't know yet how Iran is going to respond until the United States is very, very sure that they have destroyed the capability of Iran to respond. It is going to be difficult to secure this entire region for the United States. But that is the announcement that has come in from Trump. Let me take this across to Dr. Awad on whether this is a decision that Trump would have taken knowing and keeping in mind the challenges that come with it, or whether this is the knee-jerk reaction that has come in from the U.S. president because the talks failed. Was U.S. actually expecting that within just one round of talks with Iran, there will be a sudden solution?
Well, that was where he was aiming, and for this reason, he wanted to make sure that there is no any paper in the Iranian hand to bargain with. I mean, he is for himself, according to his advisor, according to the briefing he gets, which is not giving him the full picture of the real war going on in the Iran. He was told that they totally obliterated Iranian infrastructure, military infrastructure, their navy, but yet the Iranians are still attacking with precisely inside Israel and inside the American and the Arab countries. So therefore, you cannot keep on claiming and counter-claiming many of the issues. That's why most of the American media also were questioning all this rhetoric of the American president tweeting, and they asked him, you downgraded the American dignities. I believe he's making, United States is losing its pride, its dignities, its respect globally because of Trump. And going by this direction of blocking the Strait of Hormuz without taking the ramification and the fallout of that kind of an action is going to be a tough challenge for the United States, because he failed to force the country which is using this Strait of Hormuz to send their warship. They said, for what? We need to send our warship when we are already allowed our ship to pass through. It is only the United States and the adversaries to Iran who were refused their ship to be gone. By the way, French ships also were going. Some of the fertilizer were crossing from that side, the French, German. So there is no question that it's only the American where he is feeling the heat, and he wanted to break the bones of Iranian. And Iran understand it very well, and I think they're playing their card very well, because they know it is impossible job and is the horrendous task or Herculean task for the United States to improve, unless and until they start following the ship and scrutinizing the paper, whether you pay the $1 million toll to the Iranian or no, and if you pay, then what you will do? You will tell them to go back and dispose it? What kind of a chaotic situation is he creating? It's a total anarchy.
Okay, total anarchy, and the narrative around these negotiations are also going to be extremely important. How is it looking for the United States? Because the entire world is watching. And Mr. Peter, these trade routes, oil routes, are they going to be deciding the new global order? Is that what we're seeing play out in real time?
Well, as Dr. Awad has said, the global order is changing, and the United States has been badly diminished right now. But, we have to go back to 2015. Iran gave up its nuclear program effectively. They were enriching to 3.67%. They shipped out 90% of their enriched uranium. The U.S. had what it wanted. The Strait of Hormuz was open. And Donald Trump blew that whole thing up. And then even again with these negotiations, the Omani foreign minister said Kushner and Witkoff did not even understand what the Iranians were proposing. I mean, this is so much a war of choice based on ignorance and stupidity and not looking forward. And so now we're in this difficult position where the U.S. is either going to back down and be humiliated and be declared the loser in this war that nobody really wanted to begin with except for Netanyahu, or, because the Iranians see the United States kidnapped the Maduros. The United States threatened to invade Greenland. The United States threatened war with Mexico, Colombia, Canada, Panama. So the reason why the Iranians want to hold on to that enriched uranium now is because they think that the threat of a bomb is the only thing that protects them from the U.S. and Israel. They've been attacked twice already. The North Koreans laid that out clearly, that the mistake that some countries are making is that they don't have nuclear bombs, so the United States can invade and overthrow them. What we need is a peaceful resolution. The ultimate answer is for Israel to give up its nuclear weapons, for Iran to give up its nuclear ambitions, and to have a peaceful region, which makes so much more sense than constant warfare, which seems to be the alternative that Trump and Netanyahu are envisioning. But that in this era makes no sense at all. So we're going to need outside forces to put pressure on the U.S. and Israel and possibly Iran to come to...
So you're saying a lot of it also comes from the fact that there are different yardsticks for the nuclear program for Israel versus the yardstick that the United States has for Iran?
The United States wants Iran to not even have a nuclear program.
Yeah.
But Iran says, as a proud civilization, a proud country who's endured this attack unfairly, illegally, immorally, we're not going to give up our nuclear program under that kind of duress. But if you offered Iran a comprehensive, peaceful solution, then they would have less need for a nuclear program. Under the NPT, they're allowed to enrich uranium. They were enriching to 3.67%. That's legal and that's allowed because countries are allowed to have a civilian nuclear program, but they're not allowed to go for a bomb. And Iran had a fatwa against developing a bomb. And after the U.S. blew up the JCPOA, they started to enrich to a higher level so they would be able to hold that out as a threat potentially. So, but nobody wants to see Iran have nuclear weapons. If Iran tested a nuclear weapon, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Turks, the Egyptians would all develop nuclear weapons. And then that region would be total chaos. So nobody wants to see that, but the Iranians need some promises, some safeguards that they won't be invaded again. We saw this decapitation strike. We saw their leaders killed. We see much of their infrastructure being destroyed. They are the victims right now, but they have the world economy by a stranglehold. And they're not going to give that up until there's going to be a serious peaceful resolution.
Okay, all right. At the heart of it all is the nuclear program of Iran. Now, is Iran very clear that it's not going to give up on its nuclear program because the United States has a different yardstick for Iran versus with Israel? We don't have much information on the nuclear program that Israel has. And is that the reason why Iran is also very clear that it is not going to back down? Special story for 9 p.m. as well. I'm thanking all guests for joining us on the broadcast. With their expertise, many questions still remain. The biggest of them all is, of course, whether there will be a climb down from the United States. What next in the negotiations with Iran? We're keeping a track of that. Quick break. We'll be right back.